Okay. Thank you for inviting me. I really much appreciate that. And as as you perhaps know, feet are really one of my favorite topics to talk about. So I'm really, really happy to talk about that one. Okay. So hoof to harness. Um, why is foot balance so important, and why has it such a massive influence on the horses? That's what we today are going to look into. Just a short summary about me, very short. I studied veterinary medicine in Switzerland and Hungary. I was then for over a decade self-employed in Switzerland before we moved to the UK and then to Ireland. I have been working with the Swiss driving teams from 2006 to 2021 before we moved to the UK. And then from 2022 on, I had the honor to be the team vet for the British single driving team. So why are feet so important? Um, there's literally no hoof, no horse. Xenophon, that was over 2,500 years ago, he already knew that. So even the old Greeks, when they were training their horses, they made sure that the foot care was properly done. Feet are really the base of everything, where everything has connection with the ground and all the forces come up through the body is coming through the feet. Why is that so important? Because we have the fascia lines, and the magic really lies in the fascia that is connecting everything. Here is a short summary of what we're going through. First, a few general considerations about shoeing and when you go to competition, what's important. Then a few facts about fascia, why it's so important. Then we'll look at the equine myofascial lines. These are the force lines through the muscles and the connective tissue, where the forces are running through the body, and what the horses, these movement lines that the horses are need to move. Then how do we recognize foot balances? How do hoof imbalances look? How do they influence the rest of the body and why? How can we evaluate that from the outside or with x-rays? How do we evaluate horses in movement and can recognize potential problems ourselves? What effects do uneven landing and loading have on the rest of the body? So can they cause pathology in or problems in other areas of the body than just the hoof itself? Then I have a few case examples, and at the end there is going to be some resources for you to look up if you want to know more. And there's some really nice websites and stuff like that. So general points, a well-balanced foot is really, really important, but it also needs to fit the conformation of the horse. There's no just one thing fits everything. It's like it needs to fit the body of your horse. If they have poor foot balance, it predisposes them to slipping, stumbling, injuries, and other pathology along in the whole body. It's really important that you get those things sorted out before you start competing or working horse intensely, because then it's just a tiny repetitive micro trauma with every step that happens. And, you know, it might be okay for 12 months. It might be okay for 18 months. But then there's one step that they do too much. And, you know, it was always fine. It was working, but it was all the time breaking a little tiny bit. So prevention is always better than healing. Most horses who are in work and who are working on hard ground or in deep ground do profit from some kind of frog support or DIM, especially if they have the tendency to have very flat feet or very upright feet. You can help them a lot with some very, very simple things. You might need to adapt how your horse is shod during the season, depending on the terrain you work in. Like, for example, if you have a horse who is a little bit older, has some slight arthritis, the ground gets very, very hard. Having some pouring pad or some DIM in to help with concussion is often very, very helpful for those horses. Plan your shoeing cycle depending on your competition schedule or when you have trainings. So it's always better. A normal shoeing cycle, depending on the growth of your foot, is between 4 and 6 weeks. Ideally, you should not start before, like, a week after you've shot. I mean, if you know your horse is inside out and your farrier does it too, and you know there's absolutely no problem after shoeing, then it's not a problem if you do that before you drive somewhere for a competition. But ideally, have them shot a week before you compete, and they shouldn't be longer than 4 to 5 weeks into the cycle while you're competing, because during a growth cycle, the angles inside the hoof change, and it might predispose them to stumbling or slipping at the end of the cycle. If in doubt, better have a short cycle and rather have just 4 weeks instead of 7 or 8 weeks. Just consider that when you are when you want to compete. Just make sure that you put your shoeing where it's ideal for your horse. Studs, remove them when they're no longer needed, because there's always an injury possibility with studs. If in doubt, better use them than not. Because there's nothing worse than a horse that's slipping. If they just need to slip once, it doesn't have to cause an injury. But if they get unsure, they will hold back. They will not perform to their optimum. And that's what's costing you seconds. Lost shoes will cost you time. That's another reason why it's better to have somewhere between the first week and the 4th, 5th week of the shoeing cycle. The possibility of losing shoes during a marathon is just higher at the very beginning and at the end.
Martina, really sorry. I think Sheila, somebody's got their mic on. If you could just turn that off. That's great, thanks.
No, I think she's getting feedback. She seems to have two devices on.
Are we good? Yeah. So it's also when you have lost a shoe, it costs you time, and your horse might be so sore afterwards that you might not be able to compete anymore.
Sorry, Sheila McNeil, I think you have 2 devices on, he thinks, and you're getting a lot of feedback. You can't actually hear Martina. So if you could turn yourself on mute or turn one of the devices off, that would be great. Oh, I think she's done it.
Perfect. Oh. Okay, I start again with the lost shoes.
Sorry, I think still getting some feedback. Andrew, I think you might be able to mute everyone from your end because you're the host.
Sheila's on mute now, that's fine.
Yeah, I've muted everybody now, so.
So Martina, you will need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, hang on.
I did. Can you hear me again?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I start with the lost shoes again. So lost shoes will cost you a lot of time, predispose your horse to the injury. And if they have been too sore from the concussion, depending if it was like the first or the second obstacle where you lost your shoe, they might be still sore the next day and you can't even compete. So lost shoes are always something that we try to prevent. In case you lost a shoe, always have some backup shoes with you. And that means like old shoes that are not 100% worn, just ask your farrier to put it on the side. Have the pads and studs that need to go with it, because we don't always find them, especially if you lose them in the water. You can't find them. And if you have some special shoes on with a pad or something like that, you might not be able to get them put back on by the farrier how you want it. So Facts about fascia. So if we are, fascia is literally, that's the magic that connects everything. It is the connective tissue. It surrounds every cell in the body. Here we have an absolutely wonderful picture from Dr. Elbrund, where we can actually see where fascia is. We have down here an artery, you can see with a big muscle layer around it. Up here, a little bit, can you see my little arrow? That one? Here you can see the veins, has a much thinner layer, and that one here is a nerve. So all that, epinorium, perinorium, endomorium, all the connective tissue around it, this is all fascia. This is very, very important. Fascia gives the body structure. It keeps the muscles, the organs, the blood vessels, the nerves, all in their place. And it allows the fascia, also allows to glide. For example, nerves don't like to stretch, but if we have our hand and it's straight, it's a much shorter line than that, or even that. So nerves only like to stretch about 10, maximum 12%. And the distance from here to something like that is much longer. So how the body does it, nerves, for example, are always in an S shape in our body, in a fascia layer. So if the fascia then stretches and the body stretches, all the nerve does, it gets into elongated stage. And when it contracts again, it goes back into an S shape. This is how the body gets around that nerves don't want to stretch. And fascia allows the body to do that. It connects also our muscles to the bone, and it goes inside the bone. Like all the little cells inside our bone that react to the tension, it's fascia tension, it's tension from ground reaction forces going through the body that allow the bone to change its structure. Bone changes its structure with every step that we do, depending on the forces acting on it. So if you're wearing high heels as a woman for a few hours, your hip bones already change their inside structure compared to when you wear sneakers during the next day. So the body is constantly adapting and changing to the forces going through our body. It's extremely elastic. It can stretch over 200%. What's really important. I absolutely adore that picture. This is a little muscle fiber that we have here, that white snow-like structure that looks like sheep wool. This is fascia. This is where it glides in. You can see it's between all the little fibers we have here. And that what you see here is a little nerve that innervates those muscles and tells them when to contract or when to relax. 90% of all free nerve endings, these are the receptors that tell our body where in the room we are. That means if you stretch your arm out and don't look at it, you know exactly, is your hand at the fist? Is it stretched out? Is it down? Or is it up? Without looking at it. And this is the tension from the fascia and the nerve endings inside the fascia telling your body where it is. This is called proprioceptive input that tells your body what it actually does. Fascia can change flexibility. That means it can be once stiff or it can be very flexible. And if that changes, because we did here, our nerves are inside that, and a lot of the receptors are inside the fascia. So if we have too much tension or fascia is not able to glide, it will influence our nervous system and it will cause some altered movement patterns. So if we look at the forces that are created through fascia, everybody thinks, oh, it's only muscles doing the movement. Muscles contract, but they do not create a lot of the forces. For example, our biceps, here is the example on here. Biceps comes from here and goes down to your elbow. But a lot of the fascia from the biceps muscle attach actually down here, causing a much longer lever. This enhances the forces of our biceps by over 40%. That is a lot. And that's just from the lever forces created from the fascia. So it helps with strength. It is also one of the reasons why the forces, when they're going through the body, might accumulate at a special point, because we get those centers of fusions where all the forces coming through running together at one point. And this is where we often get problems, be it if it is at the joints, like for example, a hook or an SI or the lumbar area in horses, or in people, often tennis elbows from overusing. But often the origin of that problem is somewhere else. In people with tennis elbow, we know the problem is often up here in the neck and in the shoulders and the wrist. But the pain we get is in the elbow. The elbow is just secondary due to overuse of other structures, but the force is running through and it's not moving here and it's not moving here. Then you get the overload here. And the same happens with the horses. Too much tension or forces on one certain point will lead to an inflammation somewhere else in the body along those forces that are going through the fascia. So fascia is important that it moves. If we do not use it, for example, a tendon, it will cease, it will shrink, and it will change its collagen type that it has in there. So it will get weaker. So if we have a horse on box rest for whatever reason for several weeks, we have to keep in mind that also the connective tissue is getting weaker everywhere. It's not just like, for example, we had a peel bone fracture. It needs to be on stall rest for a few. That doesn't mean it's just the bone healing. We have all the connective tissue that's getting weaker. That's why it's so important that they do some exercises in the box, and just be it like do some cookie stretches or something like that. Put them on balance pads or anything that gives some loading there. And also a reason why we start very early with walking exercises. Depending on the type of load that we put on fascia, it will change its type, what we have. The most is like stretch and flexion, so extension and flexion. There we need very elastic fibers, and this is usually our type 1 collagen. That's what we usually find in tendons, ligaments, and the fascia itself. Depending on what they do, we have a little bit more of the type 1 who is super elastic, type 2 is a little bit less. So if we have forces that are mainly compression forces, like for example in joints, where we have it in the cartilage, there we have more type 2, but it's more stable. And then we have a lot of shear forces, where we have like forces coming from all directions, not just here. This is where we have a mixture of type 1 and 3. We have that where we have the most movement. The more type 3 we have, the more dense it gets and less movement. And that's also what we find in scars. This is why it's so important when the horses move, that they do it in a good movement pattern, because depending on how they move, they develop different collagen fibers, and type 3 is more likely to rupture than a type 1. Also, the fascia produces the so-called hyaluronic acid. This is just a lubrication that is in between, and depending on their hydration level and also how healthy fascia is, this can be reduced or at the healthy level. If it's reduced, the probability of them not moving properly and being pretty stiff. It's the same for us when we get older. Our hyaluronocytes or fasciocytes, they do not work as good. So we get all a little bit stiff and we move a little bit less than we used to move. So when we look at the forces that are acting on fascia, fascia, like I said, adapts extremely well. The more forces are acting on it, the more it changes. And within 2 years, the body replaces over 75% of the whole connective tissue in our body, be it tendons, be it ligaments, all the connective tissue that allows the gliding, all that gets replaced. So in 2 years, over 75%, that is a lot. That also means the body needs a lot of protein to do that, and collagen. So there are superficial and deep layers. They have different functions. Superficial is mainly for stretching. These are the big groups that need to move. That's the skin that needs to move. Deep layers are more for stabilization. Think about stabilizing your trunk, the back, feet, organs. We don't want them to move around like crazy. We kind of like the heart to stay somewhere in the chest and the diaphragm be stable. So there we have a lot of deep layer that are relatively stiff. So if we now look, where do those force lines run? 2015, Elbrond and Scholz published the first paper about equine myofascial lines. And here you see the different lines and where they're running. We have the superficial, deep, and dorsal right line that come from the hind foot, go along the back, and end up here behind the eye socket. We have the superficial ventral line that ends again down here at the foot, runs up along the whole ventral line, goes through the pectoral muscle, and ends up here in the TMJ and the hyoid. Then you have the lateral lines, here the orange ones. These are there to stabilize everything in a rotation movement. And the dorsal line is everything that the top line is needed for. The ventral line stabilizes all the movements where they have to roll up. The other one is where they have to extend. That's the two movement. Then we have the spiral line. That's one that crisscrosses over the green one. It crisscrosses over at the withers, crisscrosses over at the belly, crisscrosses over on the inside of the pelvis, comes around, crisscrosses over again here, and then runs along the neck and ends up here. So this crisscrosses quite a lot, but it is the one that is the major responsible for the canter. And that explains why horses are so skewed. We have left, front, and then comes over, and then we have these two legs together, and then, or these two legs together, and then you have the outside leg, and then it goes and is here up to the neck. The functional line is that light blue one that we have here. This is what we need. That's a diagonal, left, front, right, hind, and the opposite. That's the main one that functions at the trot for the movement. And then we have the protraction and retraction line of the front limb, where we're going to look at afterwards a little bit more in detail, because like the deep dorsal and ventral lines and the deep and superficial and the retraction and protraction lines, these four are the most important for our feet. Since 2021, there is additional descriptions for the deep ventral lines. I'm going to have a look at them afterwards, and 2 additional forehand lines. What is important there, responsible for abduction and adduction and also rotation, because we do not have muscles in the horse who explain how they can rotate their feet. But they can. Everybody who has seen a horse going into a turn can see that they actually turn their feet to place them as well as possible. It's not as from us that can do that massive, but they actually can do some kind of rotation. And that is done with fascia pull from further up. Anybody who is interested to learn more about those, Elbrand and Schultz and Tove Due, they wrote the book about equine myofascial kinetic lines, where they have everything described in detail, which muscles it is exact, how they function, how they dissect them out. You can see how the lines in the fascia run. It's really, really interesting for anybody who is interested in that. What I also think is important is to keep in mind the hind feet, the pelvis, and the back to the head is all one connected movement unit. We have bony connection there, so it is a little bit more stable, and it is very important because we have a lot of propulsion coming from the hind. The forehand is a different movement unit. It has its own lines. We're going to see that afterwards. And it is more for concussion and suspension, but it is more flexible because we only have a soft tissue connection from the shoulders to the rest of the body. So if we look at the deep lines, this is the deep ventral line, the red one. The blue one is the deep dorsal line. We can see it all starts again at the feet, goes up into the pelvis, and then here it splits up into 3 lines as long as it goes through the body. So we have the superficial part, the superficial part of the dorsal line, of the ventral line, the dorsal part, that's directly under the spine. And then it goes here to the thoracic opening. Then we have the ventral part of the ventral line. That goes just the abdominal muscles that we have on the inside, goes around heart and lung, and then goes up again here and ends up here at the highway. And then we have the one here in the middle. This is what encases all the internal organs that we have. This means the kidneys, the liver, the intestines, everything is hung up on the fascia and is kept in place there by fascia tension. So fascia is, as you can see, it's a very, very thick and important layer, that deep ventral line. It even has like 3 layers that it goes inside the body to push to transmit the forces from the hind to the front. And at the same time, when those forces are transmitted from back to front, it keeps everything in situ where it's supposed to be. And with that, we have also a high shock absorption that has to go in, because that also encases all the organs. It has a marked influence on organ function. This is sometimes when you have a horse with a very tight abdominal line. When they start trotting, you often hear the whoop, whoop, whoop. This is like part of that before they loosen up, and then everything is gliding again, and you don't have the air sucking that is happening because of the tightness. You also have like force transmission from back to front. If you think in a kangaroo, we have that even more, but also horses do have a very, very strong tendon over the hock here, and the deep ventral line is part of that. And this is energy storage and also then releasing the energy. Fascia is very, very highly influenced by tension. The more tension we have on there, the more force transmission we have, as long as it's gliding, because it's storing those forces. If it is not gliding, it can have a negative influence, like I said before, on your nervous system, because then it's blocking some nervous neural input. Fascia is non-neural. That means the nervous system is not influencing the fascia, but the fascia is influencing the nervous system. So if we have too much tension and pain somewhere, the best example is most of the people who have back pain that's not reacting on painkillers. This is due especially chronic back pain, this is due to fascia contraction. And that doesn't react, unfortunately, on painkillers, because fascia is not influenced by our nervous system, and it's not an inflammation that we have, or it's just, or a much smaller one, but it is an overuse, and it's too much tension that is causing the pain and the densification. That's why manual therapy for this kind of pain works so well, or we need to use some other pain medications where we either work on the nervous system or directly on the fascia itself. That's why CBD, like hemp, is so helpful for those, because 90% of the cannabinol receptors are inside fascia. And that's when we can help those pain. How do I say? That's special kind of pain when it comes from myofascial pain. The fluid content is like very important. That's why I said the better hydrated you are, the better everything is gliding, and the better the movement. So it's not just for our organ function that a good hydration is important, it's also for our muscle function and for our connective tissue function. It communicates with itself. So if we have too much tension at one area, because everything is connected, you will have a problem perhaps up here, or the other way around. And the other thing is emotions, because it changes our body posture. Same for horses, be it discomfort, be it pain, be it joy. It influences our body posture, and it influences our tension on the fat. Same goes for the horses. That's why it's so important that they like what they do. And that's, they need to be comfortable in their body while they're working, because it has an influence on how their body is functioning, not just from the nervous system, but also from the connective tissue itself. This is something where a lot of research, especially in the human medicine, is right now going into. And it's really, really interesting. So now, the protraction and retraction line. These are for the front end, the most important when it comes to our foot balance. Now we're going towards hoofs. So the protraction line is the pink one. It extends the leg forward. So what it's important for this part is the breakover. That means from heel lift to toe lift, how the horse gets the leg into the air. The blue, the protraction line, is the one that pulls the leg back, but more importantly, it stabilizes it during the stance phase. So this is the one that is like highly influenced by foot balance, especially if it's lateromedially off or off towards the back. And while I said a very long toe is influencing more the pink line. Same for the back legs. There it's just like the ventral and the dorsal lines who influences that massively. We already said the dorsal line ends up over the eye and goes along the whole back, over the hock and down there, while the ventral line comes from the inside along the belly up here, and that's up here. It's really important to keep in mind, if we have a foot imbalance, depending on where the weakest part is, or if there's other things that kind of like had an influence on the body, be it that the horse has been cuffing previously and now it has some contracted muscles, this all influences where we see problems at the end, because the tension patterns are actually showing up somewhere else and often not in the foot itself. So if we look now, that's the part where it gets to something practical that you can use at home. This little mare is gonna follow us a little bit, so we're gonna have a look at her and evaluate how she stands. If you look at her from the outside, from the side, we can see that she's pretty camped under be it on the front or on the hinds. She looks a little bit like a goat on a rock. You can see a healthy horse that is comfortable in its body. It's standing with its leg perpendicular to the ground. It's like a table. That's when they use the least amount of force to stand there. So if we look at the horse and we see that they are camped under in the back and in the hinds, we know it's kind of like holding. The question is then why? There's a lot of different causes for that, but foot imbalances is one of the very common ones who can cause that. And with this horse, that was the underlying issue. The plumb line that we see is really something. When I look at the horse, that is one of the first things that I look at. I also then look at, do I have muscle tension up here? How is the muscle development of the hind muscles here? Also, do I have, like in this horse, a hypertrophy of the triceps? It's very prominent in that. And then I have to ask myself, why is a warmblood having a muscle here like a quarter horse? All is depending highly on what kind of breed you have. But here we can see that we have a little bit less muscle, but a lot of tension around the stifle here. So the question is then, why do we have those things in a horse that's kind of like just standing there and should be relaxed? I also always check, how is the fetlock? Sometimes when they have like hyperelastic connective tissue, you can see that their fetlock is already dropping. This is often a warning sign that we have something going on with our suspensories and other connective tissue. So if we look at that mare now from the front, so is that mare built toe wide, or is she forced to stand toe wide? It's often a very tricky question. Is it really a conformation or is it a compensation pattern? In this case here, it is obviously a compensation pattern. If we look at the mare like that, we would think, yep, she's very toe wide, but she isn't. If we lift that leg up and see what the angulation of the joints are doing, we can see she comes nicely out here off the elbow, very straight and correct. And then when we see she's slightly offset here in the carpus, comes down slightly medial, and then we have a marked towing conformation fetlock down. So if that leg would be trimmed as for the conformation of that horse, stand on the right front, toe in. If we look then at the left front, we can see again, nice straight leg, more or less straight down here, tiny, tiny little bit toe in, but really tiny. That's a very, very correct, more or less straight leg. So this horse on the left front should be straight. If we look, she's on both legs toe out. She's forced from the trim to stand toe out. What you also see is this leg is not as bad. So if I ask her to lift the leg, you can see she's only leaning over a tiny bit to compensate. When we ask her on the foot, that is like toe in, but forced to trimmed to be toe out, you can see how she's like leaning over a lot. That's another give for you, or another indication. If you lift your horse's leg up and it can lift it just straight without having to shift its body and its center of gravity to balance, then, you know, everything is fine. If they have to shift to be able to lift the leg, there's something not okay. It doesn't have to be the feet, can be somewhere else, but this is not normal. Same here. Here is the middle picture. Oops, sorry. Come on. Here we see again, we have a horse with a marked toe out conformation hock in the hinds, obviously, and the same here on the front. This is slightly misleading because the owner is pulling the horse over because he's so leaning on this side, but you can see again, he's leaning very hard to be able to lift that leg. This is a more or less straight leg, perhaps even slightly toe out, but because she's pulling, she's changing the angulation of what we see here. I left it in on purpose so I can make you aware of that. It's really important how you lift the leg up when you want to check that. Only very light, cup the leg where the tendon is running, and don't pull to any side if you want to see how it correctly is. Here we see again that horse is kind of like straight out of the elbow, straight down, and then slightly toe in. You're going to see him again later. So if you want to evaluate the front limb from just the hoof itself, then one thing is the position on how it's standing. The horse should be able, like said previously, to put the leg down perpendicular to the ground. If they're constantly putting to the side or to the front, just not weight bearing at a perpendicular angle under their foot, there's something going on. If we look at that foot from the top when we lift it up, here you can see it's the inside, here's the outside. Always take the whole inside of the hoof into account. That means look at the cartilage too. So look at the distance from here to here, and look at the distance from here to here. You can see there's a marked difference. Even though we have that cartilage shoved up, here is much, much longer. We also see that there is a problem with the frog and the digital cushion because it starts to rupture here. This is not normal. This is always when we have uneven landing, they start to tear up in the middle of the frog. We're going to have a nice video where we see that better afterwards. Also, when you look at that, check if the foot is level, if the shoe is level. This shoe was never level when it was put on. And just, I don't know where the farrier has been looking, but that was never level. You can see that shoe is like, it's not straight. It should be straight, and it's not. It's not just an uneven trim, it's also an uneven shoe. You will see all the kind of nice and fantastic things when you start to look. The other thing is, often when that's going on for a while, this was the second shoeing cycle for that horse, and he was very, very lame, and they couldn't block him and couldn't find out why. So it got referred to me. Here you can see sometimes they're very sensitive when you press on the areas where they're too much torque on the inside. We're going to look at the inside of the hoof when we have such imbalances, how that looks from the inside. Whereas a sensitivity from the frog and the ungular cartilage is another thing that you can test yourself. Here, the same, when we look at the hinds, we could see that horse was very toe out. He doesn't have such a toe out conformation. If we look down from the heel straight down, we can see that the fetlock is slightly offset to the inside, which predisposes him to compress the outside a little bit more, just because he's more standing on the inside and the force is coming down more on the inside. This makes it even worse when they are longer on the inside. You can see that's a marked difference here again. And we have the same problem. If you can see that shoe is even bent down here, and it's just not level. I can't say more than that. You can also see again here, it's open. When we will watch him walk afterwards. You can see how the uneven landing is. You can also see the wear pattern. When you look at the shoes, you will see that the outside is worn much more. You will see that the nail heads are nearly gone. He breaks over around here. If you compare that to the nail here, they're put in at the same time, and you can see this one's still sticking out. That one's already worn down to the shoe. And again, the deep central sulcus in the middle of the frog is starting to open up. You have uneven width outside and inside. If the foot's not balanced, this is something that starts to happen. You will also see when it's more pronounced that the tip of the frog, like in this one here, is starting to move, because you would have the middle, it should be here. When we look here, that's about the middle of the shoe. And we see it starts to wear off to the high side. The tip of the frog always moves towards the high side. Same here from the brown mare that we've seen before. Here we can see her hind legs. We can see it's always nice to check, is the coronary band level with the ground? Here we can see in that toe area, it's longer. If we look on the hinds, we can see that the inside is markedly pushed up and longer. You can see the frog here already started to atrophy on this side due to the tension. Again, we look down on the leg and we can see, take the cartilage into account and look at the difference of the length from here to here. This is a marked difference of the length. You can also see it when you look on the foot on the ground from the hind. Cartilage ends about here, cartilage ends about here. So the inside is much longer than the outside. Again, same with the wear pattern. You can see the inside and the outside nails are not worn the same. The horse is heavily landing on the outside. If we look now on the inside of the hoof, this is a beautiful picture from Lindsay Field. She has a wonderful website called The Study of the Equine Hoof, where she does a lot of dissections of feet, and you can have a look at her, and she always has beautiful pictures and explanations what you see. So if we look here, this is like literally cut at the heel bulbs. So we can here see the deep flexor tendon. You can see the superficial that just comes in here, the last branches that come forward to P2. And what interests me most now from the hoof inside, here we have our ungular cartilages. On this side, we have it shoved up, like we saw it on the other picture. And here it's in a normal, in a normal position. So here we see again, when it's pushed up, the blood vessel that we have, it gets compressed. This is how it should be normally in a relaxed state. This is how it constantly is when it's pushed up. We have a lot of ligaments that connect the ungular cartilage to the coffin bone, to the passant bone, and to the P1, what's it in English? Fetlock and the above, and also in between each other and down to the navicular. So there's lots of little ligaments that we have. The moment the inside get pushed up, and that's done by nature to stabilize it, because like the ungular cartilages and the hoof, he should adapt to unevenness. So what it does, it's that movement. But if it's already at the maximum, that's what happens when we have an uneven trim, and it stays at the maximum and it's pushed up where it's not supposed to be constantly, then it starts to be painful. And this is what happens. And also our blood support in that area gets less. So we have less growth, and often that's why we have, when they're high on one side, they start to have a dish on the other side, because that part is growing faster and starts to move out. If we look at a more or less healthy foot here from behind, it has a slight, tiny sheared heels. This is how it looks from the outside. If we take the skin off, we can see that here we have the tips of the ungular cartilage, but you can see it's kind of like we have a digital cushion that's slightly compressed, but otherwise it's fine. And you see, it's an even area. Now we have one that has a collapsed digital cushion. That means the cushioning part and the frog on the inside is just like compressed for whatever reason. You will see that this starts to stick out. And this is what we can palpate. And this is not ossificated. That's not like a bone. That is still cartilage. What we can see, it's way more sticking out. And here you start to have a dip, and it's very soft in here. No. Here we have a relatively upright foot with, again, a slight sheared heel, but we also have contracted heels. Here we can see, due to the imbalance, we have, again, here, the opening between the left and the right heel going through the frog. It shouldn't be. And because the frog withered away, that distance here, that distance down here got smaller and everything contracted like that. So everything is compressed. So we have not just the digital cushion that's missing, but now we also have the whole thing going together inside like that. And this is very uncomfortable on the heel area because everything is constantly pinching. If we look here, we have a healthy foot with a nice digital cushion, a good angulation. And here, if you look at the bottom, we have the same with an underrun heel and a long toe. But if we look, the toe is about the same length as the top one. But because we have a much lower angulation of the inside, we call this here, that to the ground surface, this is what we call the palmar or plantar angle. You often hear the vets or the farriers talk about the PA. This is what that is, palmar or plantar angle. If it's in the front, it's a palmar and palms. If it's in the back, it's plantar. That's why we just call it PA. Then you can use it for both fronts and hinds. But what happens is, like, the lower the angle is, the more the toe seems to be long. It doesn't always have to be a long toe. That's why the farriers often said, but I can't take more toe off. They literally can't. But what then needs to happen is we need to lift it up. So relative to the length, we're going to get a different angulation and the toe seems shorter. We can have a look at that on the x-rays afterwards. So how can you recognize from the outside that there is actually a problem with the so-called PA? We can just very easily use the coronary band projection. So if you look, especially in the hinds, it's very easy. You can use the coronary band and just prolong the angle that your coronary band has to the front. This is a very nice Freiberger stallion from Avanche. You might even have seen the ones who go single competition. They might have even seen him. He's a very, very nice horse. So here you can see his coronary band angle goes towards the carpus. If it goes towards the carpus, slightly under, that's perfect. That's very healthy and fits the conformation of the horse. If it goes towards the elbow, we are in the territory of around 0. This is already too low, but depending on where in the shoeing cycle is, this is something that can be acceptable. At the end of the cycle, it might be okay. Anything that goes towards the belly, we're in negative territory. They did research on that, and they found that in 90% of the horses where we have a 30-degree angle or even more, they have a negative plantar angle inside, and that's a problem. So this is quite, and here you see what I mean. That means that the heel area has less foot surface under it than the toe area. And what's most important, we have the cuffing bone tipped backwards. Cuffing bones should always be tipped forwards. And we should have ideally an aligned hoof pastern or bony column here. The moment we have it tipped backwards, it's not okay. In a healthy horse with good hoof angulation, the shoulder angle here should mimic your pastern angle down here. If you have a horse with a very upright shoulder, like for example, Spanish horses or also Gelderlanders, you usually should have a very upright pastern and hoof angle. It just needs to mimic. This is how we have healthy proportions in a horse for a functional anatomy. So what happens when we have like a massive toe in or toe out conformation? The forces come always down perpendicular. The highest gravity always acts straight down. That's why we can have like a weight, and it always tells us where the ground is. Same goes for the horses. If we have like then, for example, a true toe-in conformation, we will have more forces on the inside because it's more under the body, and the forces come down straight, so there's more there. This just needs to be adapted with the trim. And here you can see the difference it makes from the trim. The horse is standing like that. You give it a proper trim. They widen up on the outs, on the hinds, and they can stand properly. Also see the difference here very clearly, how we have first uneven length, and then with the proper trim, you get them to be correct again. This is why sighting the leg is so important, and also why watching them move is so important. Every farrier should watch the horse before and after they have been working on it, because it gives you so much information that you don't get from just looking at the leg and at the horse standing. Here we have an unbalanced foot. You can see it's much higher here compared to here. What I give you 3 pointers what you need to look at. I let it run several times, but watch what happens with the fetlock. Which direction does the fetlock come straight down in an unbalanced foot, or does it veer to one side? What happens with the frog here and that central sulcus? Does it open up? And how does the leg and the hoof capsule move when it gets compressed? This is like the unbalanced foot that they had, and then they trim the balance and do the same again. So you're going to see the comparison. Can you see how the fetlock, when it's unbalanced, veers to the high side? It doesn't come down straight. It's biomechanically impossible. If you have an unbalanced foot, it will push the fetlock to one side. It can't come straight down if it doesn't fit the anatomy. The same, it tears up the central sulcus here. It really tears it apart. Every step, every weight bearing that happens. I'll let you watch it again. Just watch that fetlock. It's over more here. And here it opens up till here. And now the fetlock stays way more in the middle where it's supposed to be. And here it doesn't open up. Watch again. I thought that was very impressive and a very nice video, because it's often very difficult that you can see it otherwise. So, hammer angle or plantar angle, what's the normal? There is not really like this is the perfect. Anything between 2 and 14 positive can be okay for, depending on your horse's anatomy. If it has a short upright pattern, you will have a more upright PA that is normal. If you have a very long sloping pattern, you will have a much lower PA that is normal. Also, be aware, depending on where in the shoeing cycle you are, the angle changes. Within a 6-week cycle, we lose 2 to 4 degrees, because the toe horn grows always faster than the heel horn. So this means we always use a little bit of of PA during shoeing cycle. There is also horses who have a so-called high-low conformation. This means a true high-low. You have perhaps seen horses who have one upright foot and a flat foot. If it's a true high-low and not due to compensation, you will have different bone angles of P3. That means this angle here between the left and the right foot will be at least 5 degrees different. That means no matter what your farrier does, because there is 2 different bones inside, 2 different angles, you will never get that foot equal. The left and the right will never be the same. But what your farrier can do, he can shoe and change the bottom, so the breakover point from the shoe for your horse in a way that he is able to move nearly equally. But that is something that needs to be adapted, and your farrier needs to know, is it a true high-low? And then he can adapt to it. So why is it so important to have a proper PA and the nice angulation of your foot and the hoof capsule? Renato Veller did really nice study at the RVC down in London, where they looked how much more load do we get when we have a longer toe. And 1 centimeter more equals 50 kilograms more load on your flexor group. That is a lot. So when we know we lose some PA, we get a relatively longer toe over the 6-week cycle. And they also have been looking what's the ideal cycle is anything between 4 or 6 weeks, depending on the angulation of the foot and how fast the horse is growing. So in winter, it might be, your horse might be fine with 7-8 weeks if it's not growing a lot. But in summer, when we have a lot of sunshine, the grass is very rich, they're outside, and their metabolism is much faster, it might be that it needs 5 weeks. It's just like adapting to what's the ideal to prevent injury, and that's also seeing what's the best cycle for your horse. The more broken back your PA is, so the lower it goes. If we go into the minus degrees, 1 degree minus equals 4% more pull on the whole flexor group. Tendons start to rupture from 20-24% on. The whole loading thing, when they stand on it, they stretch for about 16 to 18%. So there's not a lot of safety margin that we have on there. If we are already by 18% and we have 1 degree minus, then we're already 22. If we have 2 degree minus, we're already 26. So we're already in the territory where with every step the horse does, it ruptures some tiny little tendon fibers inside the foot. And this is what happens. That's what I meant. You have repetitive microtrauma if your balance is not good inside your foot. So if you look at that foot capsule down here, that's a negative. You can see this is lower here than it is here. So it's broken back. It puts strain on your navicular bone and the whole area here, and it puts strain on your coffin joint here. These horses regularly need coffin joint injections. And I hear that so many times. Let's just inject the coffin joint and they'll be fine. Yes, it's good to do something about the acute inflammation there, but we also need to treat the underlying issue. Why is that coffin joint inflamed? There's always a reason. Joints, if it's not from an acute trauma, joints do not get just an inflammation for giggles, fun and shit. Oh, pardon my language. I'm very passionate about it. I want to have the horses be able to move at their best for the longest possible. And that's why it's so important to look for underlying issues causing the problem and not just treat a symptom, because this is a symptom. This is not the original problem. This might be the part of where the lameness is found, but it's not the reason for the lameness. The other thing is when the balance is not right, your circumflex artery in the hoof is not getting the same amount of blood flow. That means the heart always pumps the same amount of blood, but if one side or the back part is compressed, we do get less blood flow there. If we have less blood flow there, we get more blood flow to the toe, more nutrition, more oxygen goes towards the toe grows even faster, and the heel doesn't grow. So the problem gets worse and worse and worse because the foot balance is not right. So if we look what negative influence does have negative PA on the rest of the body, we know from research that we have problems in the fetlock from 2019, the proximal suspensory, Dyson 2007, then hock inflammation itself in 2018, stifle problems, Clemens 2019, Mansman 2010 was looking at gluteal pain and SI, and Yogi Sharp 2022 could prove that it also causes inflammation in the lumbar fascia and the lumbar area. So if we have poor foot balance in the hind with negative plantar angles, we will get problems and pathology all along the line here. And how many horses do get hock injections or stifle injections or have problems with their ligaments there? And all we do is we inject them, we give them some time off, but we do not check their foot balance. Please keep that in mind. If you have problems with high suspensories, with hock problems, with SI problems, if your physiotherapist said, oh, we constantly have like tight muscles in the gluteal area, have a look at the feet. It might be a problem there. So if we look at the X-rays, we have to have ideally an aligned hoof pastern axis. Here we can see it's upright, but we can also see there's some bullnosing. This is another sign that you can have there, because we have a compressed part here. You can see it's bulging out there. This is the least problematic foot of these three. And this is also the easiest to correct, because you can see we have quite a lot of height here. We have even more here. So if it gets a correct trim here, so we have less under the front and more under the hind, that can be corrected. And then your center of rotation that comes down here, this is a relative long toe, is no longer bisecting it 60-40 or something like that. But because it's more upright, everything slides back, and it's again 50-50 how it should be in a healthy one. Here, we can't do that because we just don't have the mass to correct it. So this is a second degree MPA that needs correction. This might be done with some pads and wedge pads and frog support and DIM. Just the DIM and the flat pad alone gives you around 4 degrees more positive angle, just a flat pad. Just because we support the digital cushion and the frog here, the soft tissue can correct itself. This here, this is the worst, even though it doesn't look that bad, but look how the horse is compensating. This is compressing the whole joint here massively. This is very, very broken back. This is already thinking about subluxating. You can see how it's already, where's my arrow? Here it's already pressing out here. So we have tension here on the coffin joint from the navicular, with a lot of tension here. And from here, this is why you often see those horses standing more under. This is when they come under with their hind feet, because they try to stretch out there. So they don't have too much tension on that joint. So they stretch out, they overload the whole area of the hamstrings and the gluteals, and that's why they get sore. And they're often also in the lumbar area. They're very, very tight in there, but you see less problems down here. Even though that horse here, we can see an inflammation in the coffin joint here. It can happen also in barefoot horses. It's not just shod horses. I also see it quite regularly. Also, foot balance, we can look from the front, and the DP can see, is the lateral medial balance correct? There's two ways to look at that. Here we can see that horse is slightly leaning to the inside, but even though it's leaning to the inside, we still see that the joint spaces here are uneven. It's still more open to the side it's actually leaning, what doesn't make any sense. Usually the side they're leaning is where it gets compressed more. So that's already something to keep in mind. But joint spaces can lie because of the leaning, and where the head is when we do that, is the leg straightly perpendicular under it. What isn't leaning is your nutrient foramen in your coffin bone. They should be ground parallel. And we can see it's lower here and higher here. Same goes for distance under P3, left and right should be the same distance. We can see up here is more. When we look at the foot at the 60 dp, that means we have the angle of the X-ray like that instead of like that. We can also check other areas. We can see here the distance from here to here and the distance from here to here is not the same. So I see again, especially in the toe area, that the outside is longer. So heel to toe is longer here on the outside. I can also evaluate, that's the additional nice thing about that kind of X-ray, I can evaluate how affected is the navicular bone. And we can see here already, we have some changes here to the navicular bone. We can also see here that it's already coming out on the inside slightly. And here you can see the same. And also what we can evaluate, what's really important, is here the rim of P3. So we can see it has slightly moth-eaten appearance. This here is how it should look normal. We can see here the heels don't look how we like to have them. Pardon me. And also here in the front, this area here doesn't look how it should be. So a lot of information for you and the farrier, how you can support your horse. So how to evaluate the movement? If we look at them, always watch the horse go away from you and come towards you. If it goes away from you, check the hind legs. If it comes towards you, check the front legs. Listen. Hard ground, hard even ground is very helpful. Also, when you go driving with your horse and you are on the road, listen to the footbeat, to the hoof beat. Is it regular? Are all four hoofs, do they sound the same? Sometimes you can still have a regular movement, but you hear they're landing harder on one foot compared to the others. This is already a warning sign. Why is it preferring one leg compared to the other? Your ears can give you so much information, and it's absolutely brilliant when you sit on there and you can see the movement of the back and the shoulders, and you can hear it's landing harder on one side than on the other. Observe the swim face. Is it interfering? Is it kicking front or hind? Is it hitting itself while it moves? Is it diagonal, or is it the same leg? Or if it's the hind to the front? These are all very important information. Why is it hitting itself? Does it have a horrible conformation, or is it forced to stand in a way that's not normal? Most horses are either straight or toe in. Very, very few horses are toe out naturally. Observe landing patterns. Is the horse landing flat? Correct, healthy landing is slightly heel first, but so slightly you actually just see it in slow motion. It should be a flat landing. But often we see they're landing outside heel, outside toe, and then they fall over, or outside heel, outside toe, and then over. So this is really important. Horses should be able to land flat, and it doesn't matter if they're toe in or toe out, they should be able to land flat. Toe out horses, naturally toe out horses often land slightly outside heel first, just because of their conformation and the tension that they have. So you will never, if a horse is massively toe out, your farrier will never be able to make him land totally flat, but anything else should actually work. observe where is the placement in relation to to the body. Do they come straight down and can bear weight with the leg perpendicular and load the leg equally so it comes straight up, or do they land on the outside, tipple over on the inside, rotate out, and the forces go like that through the leg? This will cause, again, like stress on different parts of the leg and the body further up. Observe how they're loading. Like, we have the landing now. When they put the full weight on, does the leg stay, or does it wiggle, or does it even rotate? These are all signs that shouldn't be there, but unfortunately we see that quite a lot. Is the leg straight under the ground? Like I said, is it perpendicular? Where does the break over? If I have a toe out horse and it breaks over the outside toe, this is not normal, because if you're standing toe out and the joint surfaces are like that, you break over the inside toe. These are the horses where we have to be careful that they don't hit themselves. If a horse is toe in, it needs to break over the outside toe. These horses will never hit themselves. But if a horse is forced to stand toe out, it will also break over the outside, because the joint surface is still the way like this, even when it stands like that. So it needs to break over the outside. So these are all pointers for you to tell you what's the natural conformation of my horse, or is it a compensation that I see when it stands there? Slow-mo videos are very helpful. If your eye's not trained, I still do that as a documentation anyway, to just see how is the landing and loading pattern, and also as a documentation, has it changed after we had the shoeing or after we had some manual therapy done. Walk and trot do often not show the same pattern. If it's from muscle tension that we have the difference, you will see it more pronounced in a walk than at the trot. Trot is more for lameness evaluation and like if we have proper problems with balance on the inside. Is the body swing equally? Check. Is like, are they flexing to one side? If you have horses in a hitch and they're always standing on the same side and have the bar on the inside, they might tend to be bent to one side. If you have a single horse, or if you switch side regularly, so there's cross training, that should not be the case. Instability, rotation. Also, if you have a horse bent to one side when you trot it up, tell the owner or the handler to change the side and to leave it loose. Handler can change the flight pattern and the movement pattern of the horse, and some horses are always going to bend towards the handler. If the handler changes side and the horse does it then like that, fine, then it's just due to the handler. It's not the problem of that's there. Here, if we observe landing patterns, this was a very nice little endurance stallion, and he had problems with his high suspensories. If we look here, we can see he's constantly landing on the outside, what is abnormal. He shouldn't do that, and it's a very pronounced outside landing, even though his conformation was windswept and he was like outside high on the right front and inside high on the left front. He's still landing heavily outside on both feet. Landing patterns are influenced by three things: conformation, like natural conformation that we talked about, foot balance, and the other one is pain avoidance. So if a horse is landing on the outside, we do not know, is he landing on the outside because his conformation or because he's long on the outside, or is he landing on the outside because he's long on the inside and it's painful? Like, think about a pebble in your stone, you're also landing on the outside. So pain avoidance is also a big thing to keep in mind, and that's why it's so important that we see what is the natural conformation of the horse and not how it's standing there. Landing and loading patterns are very helpful, and if you look at slow motion, we see it very clearly. Anything toe landing is always pain. Horses who are toe landing do have pain. Toe landing is never correct. We can have slight heel landing, especially in barefoot horses. You see that quite often. If it's so pronounced that you see it at the walk and they slap first the heel down and then front, that is too much. You see that often in horses who have been previously laminitic and who like to land on their heels. And the other horses, when they are sore in the toe area, they will also massively land heavily on the heel area. Anything that is not massively deviated and lands that heavy on the outside, there is a problem, and we need to look more specific at it. If we look at the body and how everything is then placed, we have been looking out just at the feet, we can see how the forces are not perpendicular to the ground. Horses should be able to load perpendicular to the ground. This is also how they can turn the best without any problem. The moment they're not able at the walk, when they're on an even ground, put their legs down perpendicular, there's something not okay. You often see also how they rotate in the hock when they move away. This will overload your high suspensories, often collateral ligaments down here, and also the collateral ligaments of the stifle, the lateral collateral ligaments, and the hock and stifle in SI area are often quite painful in those horses. Same goes for the front. If we have uneven landing, especially in the front, we often also see high suspensories when they land like that, collateral ligaments, and also especially in the carpus MC3. I had several with stress fractures that have been detected in the MRI, who had literally, because the forces are going through, they have to go through the carpus, and you find several horses, especially if they had already once or twice high suspensory problems, you will get MC3 fractures of the metacarpal bone, the third metacarpal bone. Also, lower cervicals will get problems because those horses do that. They get very tight, they have problems turning, and they often, due to the compensation pattern, will develop arthritis in the lower cervicals. If we look here, you can just see the digital cushion and how it gets compressed with the angle. This is just for you. And again, we can see how it opens up the coffin joint and the pressure that we had on the navicular when they're broken back compared to when they're corrected. Here is a very nice video that I got this week or last week from Dr. Sammy Pittman. He's a podiatry specialist in America, and this horse had laminitis. That's and it's in the pressure boot, so he can measure it. And he was looking at what was the best angle to see. The lower the angle, the more peak forces we have in the heel and in the toe, because they land heavier on the heel and they break heavier over on the toe. And you can see that very nicely in the video here. This is before and this is after. And here you can see in comparison, red is high peak forces. And you can see here we have a way more even weight distribution going through, and we have less high peak forces. So even though we lift it up, we get less forces on the toe, because there's a lot of people who say, oh, if you correct them back to the angle where they're supposed to be, you're putting so much more stress on the toe area. If you look at the pressure plates, that's not true. You can see how we actually have less forces in the toe area compared to, so we have less peak forces in the heels and in the fronts, but we have a more even weight distribution over the whole area, because frog and sole should also partially be able to do that. This is an extreme case because it had some pathology, but the same goes. If you have proper angulation of the foot that is in congruency with your anatomy, you will get less peak forces and a better weight distribution. So this is the gray horse that you saw before. Look how he places the foot in correlation with his body. Look how he's landing and loading, and see if we can see the rotation in the hind limbs. Every step he does, he rotates out in the hock. You see that? You want me to let it play again? The more it gets further away, the more difficult it gets with so much tail. But I think it's visible. He lands on the outside and then goes up and rotates out. So if you see him coming towards you, you can see the foot is looking for the ground, and you can see the forces going through the leg. With the right leg, he doesn't really know where he wants to put it. Sometimes it's more on the outside and then it's less on the outside, but that kind of like looking for the ground is another indication. And you can see how the forces wiggle through the whole leg in the slow motion. Can you see that wave pattern going through the whole limb when he comes at you? You can see it's not an even landing. It's like literally doing that, going up the limb. I'll let that run again from the front. And you can see, even though he's going straight, he's rope walking. Very heavy landing on the outside. That left leg is very toe out. He never ever landed slightly straight. This is a very nice one. This is one of the horses who had like metacarpal fractures bilateral in both carpal joints, had high suspensories. For about 2 years, I told him, please correct the shoeing, please correct the shoeing. He's not landing properly. He was constantly forced to stand straight, even though he's very toe in. He was then very lame, got sent to the MRI, and the result was he was recommended for euthanasia. I told them, let's please try to correct the shoeing. And they did a very, very good job. And they did give him a year time for recovery, but he was back to going endurance at international level at 120 kilometers. And I'm very proud of him. He's a very lovely horse. But this is how he moves. And this is how he needs to move. It's just his conformation is very toe in, but you can see he's landing flat. He's absolutely lovely. The right hand is perhaps not ideal, but everything else, you can see he's landing flat. The legs are perpendicular to the ground, even though it looks horrible, but he was born a penguin, and that's how he is. And you can't change an older horse. Anything fetlock down needs to be changed in a full up to 3 months. 12 weeks is our window. If we miss that, we can only maintain it. But I think this is a lovely example of you don't have to be straight. It just needs to be functional. And you never have to be afraid that he's going to hit himself, because like it's impossible if you like that, because it just needs to go away towards the outside. And this is how he's set up now, and this is how he functions quite well. And he came back from fractures in his carpal and suspensory ligaments that have been very severely injured, and is doing very well now. This is another one who's medially high on all 4 feet. I don't know how that happened. She had to change the farrier because she moved stables for quite a big distance, and the old farrier didn't want to move with her. And it seems that the new farrier and this horse didn't speak the same language, and he was like massively high on all 4 feet on the inside. The complaint was the horse is not having propulsion out of the diagonal again. And when I watched him move, this is what we saw. It's really nice to have the straight lines, so you can see where he places his feet. Also, you can see from nearly every step he takes with the right foot, he's like clicking and chewing. If a horse is freshly long on the inside, he wants to put the leg, because there's a lot of nerves inside telling the body where the leg is perpendicular to the ground. So if it's longer on the inside, they just put it a little bit more under them. And when they do that, the inside is a little bit longer, a little bit further away. So the hoof capsule thinks it's straight, but the whole body is like that. And this is a perfect example. This horse is literally doing that to balance his hoof capsule as well as possible. And because of that, he's no longer balanced. I mean, if I would have to walk on such a thin line, I wouldn't be able to push from behind either. And also not being very balanced when I got asked to do exercises. This is another example, like what happens when you correct negative plantar angles. Just look at the muscle tension in the hindquarters, and also here, the whole pony changed within 70 minutes only when we changed the angulation of the hind feet. Especially that one was very bad. And you can see just from a different trim and a flat pad with DIM, and we got that change. And that's just how their body changes. And if you have a relaxed body, they can build up again muscle. Here is a very, very nice example that I was allowed to use from Ian Bertram. This is his lovely horse Gear, and where we had problems that he was getting like very flat in the front feet and was a little bit difficult to get off the ground. And his farrier did an absolute very, very lovely job and collect the feet more. All we did was some frog support pads and DIM. That was all the changes we did, but we got more support for the hind feet. So the farrier was able to gather them up, and they changed quite in shape. And also the performance of the horse was really nice. I want to thank Ian for that lovely comment that he allowed me to post here, because I know everybody can tell a lot, but if you have somebody that you know and that you see while you're training with them, and you see the changes in the horses that they get by just some minor correction and by just adding balance and a little bit more support, it's absolutely wonderful when you see those changes. It's lots of different options. There's glue-ons, there's like shoes, there's aluminium, so many options. No matter what, you can see all of them do have some kind of frog support in it. Some have like full pads, some have half pads, some have ibex, some have 3D, some have marmalade. I don't care what. It's very important that we support. If we have a problem to correct balance, we need to support the whole foot, not just the hoof capsule. Here, if you want to find some information, there are some really nice websites and people you can look up, where you find videos and YouTubes and articles and all the wonderful things that help us to understand horses better. Thank you so much for your time and patience, and I hope it was understandable.
Fantastic, Martina. Goodness me, what a lot of information. I think everybody probably will have taken something from that, that they could have seen in their own horses or in other horses. Absolutely brilliant. Sorry, I was so engrossed in watching you, I've forgotten what I was saying. Anyway, I'm not sure, we have run over a little bit. What are we, 20 to 9? I don't know if you wanted any quick questions for Martina, or you want to finish now?
Yvonne, if I may, there's a question come up on the chat. But before
Perfect.
I do, can I just say, I don't drive anymore, and I wish I'd had you when I did. That was absolutely fascinating. So it was brilliant. So yeah, there's lots of compliments coming through. Somebody's asking, can you carriage drive with a bar foot horse?
Barefoot.
Oh, a barefoot horse. Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
It's the spacing on the words. But I can understand.
I mean, we had one in our team who was up to the World Championships. He was barefoot, and that was absolutely fine. The problem is if you come to a certain level, and especially in France where we have been, the ground was very, very hard. There is a point where barefoot is not giving you the traction you need on a top level to compete with, how do I say, with the top level to get the speed. Because like, even though the feet are holding up, the horses will hold back if they do not get enough grip. So this is the biggest problem. If the ground is soft, you might be absolutely fine with a barefoot horse. It's highly dependent on the ground, and it's highly dependent on the traction. So there's nothing that speaks against competing or driving a barefoot horse. Absolutely nothing. You might have to have, if your abrasion is more than your growth, you might have to put on boots, or you can use some glue-ons for competition. There is also glue-ons with full plastic where you can have some screw-in studs. So you just put them on for the competition and then go back barefoot. There is absolutely nothing that stops you from doing that with a barefoot horse, as long as they can hold it.
Anything else, Patty?
There are quite a number of comments actually, so I don't know how long you wanted to go on for, Yvonne, because we're obviously we've run over on time anyway.
Yeah, we're running over time a bit.
How about, would I suggest that people could sort of send in an email of any queries that they've got, and we can pass them on to you, Martina? Would that be okay?
Absolutely fine, yes.
What we can do as well is I'll gather the questions off of the chat, and we can maybe post them somewhere on Chit Chat or something like that as well.
Yeah.
Can I just make this isn't a question that I have, but you can all blame me for Martina coming along tonight, because Martina has actually completely changed my horse's life in the last year and a half. We've got a 25-year-old Irish sports horse who came, who we moved yards to the yard that we're at now, and he came with an abscess in the feet that were cracking. We were told to keep the shoes off him, and we just reached a point where we thought that, he's got another couple of years left in him at best. And Martina came along and did a full MOT on him, and we've now got him back in ridden work. It's not full ridden work because he is 25, but the feet are so much stronger. He's shod permanently, and all of the information that Martina's gone through tonight is everything that she told me. We spent about 4 hours in the stables together looking at everything. And the fact that the feet are connected to so much. When we fixed everything else, when we looked at the nutrition, when we looked at the the muscle imbalances, a lot of his issues was coming from a weakness in the shoulders, which was then causing issues in the feet, which was then dropping him back onto his heels. And he literally had millimeters between his heels and the ground. And he's now shod permanently and is a completely different animal. At 25, he could go out and do a veteran class at Hoy's with the confirmation and not the confirmation, with the condition that he has now. So, and we never really considered this sort of information before, because I always thought, oh, it's a bit complicated. So if anyone is in a similar situation, please do have a look into this, because honestly, it will change your horse's life. And Martina's given us, I think, probably at least another 5 to 10 years with ours. And he's a very, very happy horse now. So thanks very much, Martina.
You're so welcome.
Well done, Martina. That was absolutely fantastic. So interesting. And I'd just like to thank you so much. You're a superstar. So I think probably I'll close the meeting now. I hope everybody's had a good time. And like Callum says, if you've got any questions for Martina, give the BC an email and I'm sure Martina will get back to you. Thanks so much, everybody. Thank you, Martina.
Thank you for your
Thanks,
patience.
Martina.
Bye.